This morning, December 7th, 1941, it was a perfect Sunday in Hawaii. The sun had just risen over the Pacific. The air was warm with the scent of the sea and hibiscus flowers. In Pearl Harbor, there was absolute silence. No one was in a hurry. No one expected anything out of the ordinary. It was an ordinary day in an ordinary place. But in a few minutes, this world would disappear. And not just a war would begin. A new era would begin. An era in which there would no longer be room for illusions, for sleep. This day would become day. But now it was still quiet. While Hawaii was quiet, the world was at war. Europe was burning. Germany occupied almost the entire continent. To the east, Japan had been waging war in China for 4 years, and its cruelty knew no bounds. But America looked away. Its people were tired of war. They remembered World War I, the one that was supposed to be the war to end all wars. It hadn't ended. It left 117,000 dead Americans and empty spaces in every city. And now, as Europe was once again drowning in blood, Americans were saying, "This is not our war." The America First movement was gaining strength. But there was a man in Washington who saw further. He knew that the ocean no longer protected. That fascism, if not stopped now, would come for America too. His name was Franklin Roosevelt, and he was already looking for a way to drag the country into war. Because he understood either America fights now or it will fight later when the enemy becomes 10 times stronger. This moment, 1941, was a moment of truth for the entire world. And for America, the world was burning, and America was still debating whether it should get involved. And here comes the central paradox. The man who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor didn't want war with America. His name was Isoroku Yamamoto. He was an admiral in the Japanese Navy. But Yamamoto knew America better than most Americans. He had attended Harvard. He had lived in Washington. He had traveled the country and seen its factories, its oil fields, its shipyards. He had seen what American industry was capable of. And he knew Japan could not defeat America in a long war. He told his politicians directly, to defeat America, we will have to march on Washington and dictate terms in the White House. And I don't believe that our politicians, who talk so easily about war with America, understand how powerful America's industrial power is. They didn't listen. The military in Tokyo decided that war was inevitable, and they tasked Yamamoto, the man who had warned of it, with planning the attack. He accepted the challenge, because if war was going to happen, he wanted to give Japan at least some chance. His plan was crazy, impossible, but he believed he could pull it off. He said, for the first 6 months, I will win, and then we won't have a chance. He was right, and that knowledge would haunt him to the end. There were warnings, there were many of them, but they were drowned in the abyss of bureaucracy. The first warning was Magnetic. American cryptographers broke the Japanese diplomatic cipher. They read almost everything Tokyo said to its ambassadors. And in November 1941, the messages turned creepy. Japanese diplomats received the phrase, "East wind, rain." It was a code that meant war with America will begin. But when? Where? No one knew. The second warning was a spy in Honolulu. A Japanese man named Yoshikawa walked the hills above the harbor every day, peered through binoculars, and wrote down where ships were moored. His messages went to Tokyo. The Americans intercepted them. He sent his last message on December 6th. It contained an exact diagram of Pearl Harbor. It was deciphered only on December 8th. The third warning was radar. December 7th, 7:02 a.m., 2 young soldiers north of Oahu see something unimaginable on their screen. More than 50 planes. They call the center. Lieutenant Tyler, the only officer on the scene, says, "Don't worry, those are our bombers from California." He hangs up. In 52 minutes, all hell will break loose. 3 warnings, 3 failures. This wasn't an accident. It was a systemic failure, a system that couldn't connect the dots. Because no one wanted to believe Japan would dare attack Pearl Harbor. It was too far away, too risky, too crazy. But they did it. November 26, 1941, remote Hitokapo Bay in the Coral Islands. Cold fog, not a soul. From the fog, like ghosts, 6 aircraft carriers appeared. This was the Kido Butai, the strike group. Never before had so many aircraft carriers been assembled in one place. On board, minus 408 planes, 2,400 men. Under the command of Vice Admiral Kiichi Nagumo, their mission was impossible. 4,000 miles across the North Pacific. In November, in a storm, they sailed in complete radio silence. The radio operators sewed up their keys. On the Japanese shore, other operators transmitted false signals to make the Americans think the carriers were still in Japan. And it worked. American intelligence lost them completely. When Washington asked where the Japanese carriers were, the answer was, "We don't know." 6 carriers. The enemy. And they are not on radar, but Pearl Harbor didn't report it. The fleet continued to sleep. And the ghost fleet sailed east. Through storms, through icy waves, through the risk that any day could destroy them. On December 2nd, the code came. Climb Mount Niitaka. This means, we are going to attack. They turned south. Pearl Harbor was 230 miles away. In the pilot's quarters, the men wrote letters home. Some knew they would not return, but they went, because the order had been given, and there was no turning back. 5:30 a.m. The carriers turn into the wind. The decks are a chaos of people, planes, signal flags, 183 machines, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, fighters. The attack commander is Mitsuo Fukita. He is the first to take to the skies. In an hour, all the machines will gather in formation. They are heading south. Fukita turns on the radio and picks up music from a radio station in Honolulu. Hawaiian music guides them to their target. As they cross the shore of Oahu, Fukita opens the hatch and looks down. Perfect visibility, and there is the harbor. The ships are standing in rows. Calm. Silence. He fires a flare. The signal. Total surprise. And he says into the microphone, "Tora, Tora, Tora, Tiger, Tiger, Tiger." At 7:49 a.m., the first bombs fall. The attack has begun, and it hits everywhere at once. First, the airfields. American planes stand wingtip to prevent sabotage. Japanese pilots simply sweep through the ranks, setting everything on fire. In 15 minutes, the Hawaiian Air Force is destroyed. On the ground, without even taking off, then a line of ships. Torpedo bombers fly low over the water. Their torpedoes with wooden stabilizers run into the shallows. The West Virginia hits first. 7 torpedoes. She runs aground. Her captain, Mervyn Benyon, is mortally wounded. He refuses to leave the bridge. He dies giving orders. The Oklahoma takes 5 torpedoes. She capsizes. 429 people are trapped inside. From outside, you can hear them knocking. Rescuers cut into the hull. They save 32. Then a knock, the ship falls silent, one by one. And finally, the Arizona. At 8:06 a.m., a bomb converted from a 16-inch shell pierces the deck and hits the magazine. 1.7 million pounds of gunpowder. An explosion that was recorded by seismographs. The ship jumps out of the water, breaks in half, sinks in 9 minutes. 1,177 people. Many are never found. They are there, until now. The second wave arrives at 8:54. It finds the harbor covered in smoke. The water is burning. The Americans are already shooting, and some are taking off. 2 lieutenants, Welch and Taylor, after a night of card games, rush by car to a small airfield, take off without orders, straight into hell. Welch shoots down 4 planes on the first pass. Taylor is wounded by both his own and enemy anti-aircraft guns, but he keeps flying, between them up to 12 victories, for which Welch was denied the Medal of Honor because he took off without orders. The rules of war are not always fair. And on the ground, Doris Miller, a black sailor who had never fired a machine gun, grabs an abandoned Browning and fires until the attack ends. He shoots down at least 2 planes. He will receive the Navy Cross, the first African American with such an award. He was washing clothes when the attack began. He died in 1943 when his ship was sunk, Japanese submarine. He was 24. By 9:55, the last Japanese is gone. 112 minutes, 2,403 dead, 1,178 wounded. The fleet is in ruins. But in these ruins there is already resistance. There is heroism. There is something the enemy could not break. Nagomo stands on the bridge. His pilots report success beyond all expectations, but Fukita asks, "Give me a third strike. We can destroy the fuel tanks, the docks, the submarine base. This will break America for years." Nagomo refuses. His fleet has been at sea for 11 days. Fuel is at the limit. And most importantly, he does not know where the American aircraft carriers are. They could already be on the horizon. One strike and his fleet is destroyed. He chooses caution, turns north, and this decision is perhaps the greatest strategic mistake of the war, because those very fuel tanks, those very docks, they allowed America to rebuild the fleet faster than Japan thought possible. The third strike, which did not happen, may have decided the war, but at that moment Nagumo did not know this. He only knew, "My pilots are tired, I do not know where the enemy is, and I am going home." Thus ended Japan's greatest naval victory, and began its greatest defeat. 2,403, that's a number, let's try to understand it. Young John Anderson, 17, lied about his age to get into the Navy, killed in the first minutes. Alma Hafner, 68, a civilian, worked in the shipyard, killed by debris. 1,177 people on the Arizona, 429 on the Oklahoma, 58 on the Utah. They were more than just numbers. They were husbands, fathers, sons. They ate breakfast. They watched the sunrise. They thought about the weekend, and then, the end. And the scariest stories are the ones that don't end abruptly. Those trapped in the upturned hull of the Oklahoma. They were heard. They knocked. Rescuers cut steel. They saved 32. Then the knocking stopped, one by one. This is not just a story about ships. This is a story about people trapped in an iron coffin at the bottom of the harbor, and about those who tried to save them. All of this is a price, the price of unpreparedness, the price of overconfidence, the price of the system failing. When you read these names, you understand each number is an entire life, an entire universe, which disappeared in one morning. December 8, 1941, Washington. Roosevelt works on the speech all night. He rewrites the first draft, a date that will go down in world history. He crosses it out. He writes, a date that will live in infamy. Infamy, shame, the word that defines everything. At 12:30, he enters the Hall of Congress. His son leads him because he can't walk on his own. He stands at the podium, grabs it with both hands, looks at the cameras, at the nation, and he says, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked, ... 6 minutes and 30 seconds. Then, applause. Senate, 82-0. House, 388-1. The only dissenting vote, Congresswoman Rankin, a pacifist. She said, as a woman, I cannot go to, I'm going to war, and I'm not sending anyone else. She was shushed. She never served again. 3 days later, Germany and Italy declare war on America. America is at war, on two fronts. And Yamamoto was right, the sleeping giant is angry, but the price for that anger had already been paid. The price was paid at Pearl Harbor. The question that never dies, did Roosevelt know? Let me lay out the evidence. On the one hand, Roosevelt wanted war. He was looking for a pretext. The 1940 McCollum memo listed 8 steps to provoke Japan. Roosevelt did almost all of them. The carriers were not in harbor, conveniently. On the other hand, there is no direct evidence. Not a single document says Roosevelt knew about Pearl Harbor. Intelligence knew war was coming. But where would they strike? The Philippines, Thailand, Guam. Pearl Harbor seemed too far away, too risky. The failure of the system was real. Intelligence did not integrate data. Radar was ignored. Diplomatic codes were not transmitted. It looks like catastrophic incompetence, not conspiracy. But some documents are still classified. Some questions remain unanswered. The consensus of historians. Roosevelt may have expected an attack somewhere in the Pacific, but he didn't know it would be Pearl Harbor, and he deliberately prevented it. However, we may never know the full truth. History keeps its secrets. What happened next? Within 24 hours, 1 million Americans were trying to enlist. The lines stretched for blocks. Young men, old men, even those who knew their country hadn't always respected them, they all went, because it was their home, and it was under attack. Industry, it became a military monster. Auto factories began making tanks. Refrigerator factories made shells. Women, Rosie the welders, went to the factories. By 1944, America was producing more weapons than all the Axis countries combined. One ship, the Robert E. Peary, was built in 4 days and 15 hours, a record that hasn't been broken to this day. But there was a dark side. 120,000 Japanese Americans, U.S. citizens, ended up in camps. Their homes, businesses, lives, everything was confiscated. They were told, "You are the enemy because of your blood," but thousands of them went to army. The 442nd Regiment Japanese American became the most decorated unit in the history of the U.S. Army. They liberated concentration camps. They fought while their families were behind barbed wire. This was America. All its weaknesses, all its strength, all its contradictions, and all of it awakened. Yamamoto was right. For the first 6 months, Japan was outrageous. The Philippines, Guam, Singapore, Britain's greatest defeat in history. The empire they had dreamed of seemed within reach. Then, midway, June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, including those that had attacked Pearl Harbor, sunk in one day. Japan could no longer advance. What happened next? 3 years of island warfare: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Paloleu, Umajima, Okinawa. Each island taken at the cost of thousands of lives. And then Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and surrender. September 2nd, 1945, on the deck of the Missouri in Tokyo Bay. On the very ship that was not damaged at Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto did not live to see it. In 1943, his plane was shot down. Directly Roosevelt's orders. He died over the Pacific Ocean in the cockpit of his plane, just as he lived. The man who warned that Japan would not win this war didn't live to see how right he was. The Great War in the Pacific claimed 25 to 36 million lives. It began on a quiet Hawaiian morning in 112 minutes and changed the world forever. If you ever go to Pearl Harbor, take a boat out to the Arizona Memorial. The white structure hovers over the sunken hull. Look into the water. You'll see oil. Little rainbow specks on the surface. They call them Arizona's tears. The ship is still leaking, about 1 liter a day. Since 1941, it could leak for another 500 years. 1,177 people are in there. They were never raised. The Navy declared the Arizona a military cemetery, sealed forever. Those who served on her and survived the attack can be interred inside when they die. Several have already made that choice. Several more will. There's something about loyalty in that choice, about sacrifice, about what it means to belong to something greater than yourself. You can't put it into words. But you feel it standing on that memorial, looking into the water, and seeing the oil rises. You feel it. Pearl Harbor is more than just a war story. It's a story about how quickly the world can collapse, about the price of overconfidence, about how history doesn't warn, it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It comes on Sunday morning when all is quiet, and nothing will ever be the same again.